Hey everyone, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. When I was just starting out on guitar, I always wanted to do finger tapping ever since I heard Eruption. And we didn't have too many resources back then. I didn't have the internet, I couldn't just look things up. So I depended a lot on magazines and books. But when I was finally able to see what my favorite guitar players were doing whenever they were tapping, I was very intrigued at the different types of techniques they were using. So my personal technique is a combination of things I saw back then, the very limited amount of videos that I saw, mixed with just trying things out because, like I said, we didn't have the internet, so I just had to try things and hope for the best. But today I want to talk about the very subtle details of each of these players' techniques when it comes to tapping, and hopefully you find it as interesting as I did. So let's start with the master, Eddie Van Halen. Now, he doesn't hold his pick usually when he's tapping. I've never seen him do that. He usually puts it in his mouth, but I don't want to do that just because my picks end up on the floor all the time, and who knows where they've been actually, and I don't want to put them in my mouth. So I'll just set it on my leg here, and you have to position your thumb on the top of the neck like this, and then he actually grips the bottom as well. So what ends up happening is his index finger is free to do the tapping, and then he does this pulling back slightly up technique that you're going to see a lot today actually. A great thing about this way of doing it is you can use your palm of your tapping hand to mute the strings. That's going to be very important. Next, we'll talk about Steve Vai. Now, his technique is the closest to what I do. I think I copied a lot of what I saw when I watched Steve Vai tap. What I like about what he does is he still holds his pick, just like normal, and then he uses his middle finger to tap, uses his wrist, his palm, I should say, and part of his arm to mute the strings down here. And then after he taps, he actually goes down towards the floor, which is a comfortable thing for me to do. That just made sense because I thought about picking towards the floor like that. I thought if I tap and then I do the pluck, it's going to go towards the floor. Let gravity be your friend. He also likes to use his ring finger sometimes if he's doing multiple string tapping, which is a cool exercise actually. So a lot of guitar players do it this way, notably John Petrucci, and also Tim Henson does this too. Okay, one of my earliest influences is Kirk Hammett, and when he taps, he does some interesting stuff. He sticks his pinky out pretty straight, at least in the videos that I've seen. He holds his pick normal, which is, I like that aspect of it. I always like to be able to go back to picking easily. And then he uses his middle finger, but here's kind of an interesting thing. He doesn't mute the strings as much as like Steve Vai would do with his palm or his arm. He mostly does it with his fretting hand thumb over the top. So if you watch him do the tapping for one, you'll see his thumb all the way across like that, doing a lot of the muting duties. And then, like I said, right after he does that, he's able to go right to picking, which is very important for a lot of Metallica solos. I recently did a video, it was a hair metal collaboration where I got to play some Vito Bratta solos, and I love the solo for Weight, it's a lot of fun. I realized though he does a lot of what Eddie Van Halen does as far as the way he taps and the direction that he pulls his finger, but he holds his pick differently. So he goes from picking normal, puts the pick in his three fingers that are just curled like that, and then he's able to post his thumb on the top and then do the Eddie Van Halen tapping and pulling up. It's very effective for what he likes to do, and then he's able to just shake his hand a little bit and get right back to picking mode. And now be able to just grab the pick, go right back to picking if you have to. The Get the Funk Out tapping part has always intrigued me. That's why I did a whole video on it. I love the way he goes to tapping mode. He'll take his pick, grip it like this. See how it's fitted in an interesting way, parallel like that within my middle finger? That's important because if it's just sitting in your fingers, you have to do a little bit of maneuvering to get it back. But if it's a certain way every single time and it's stuck in there exactly the way you're used to it being, going right back to picking can be much more predictable. Now that frees up the index finger to do the tapping, thumb on top as the brace, and then nothing else gripping. Okay, so we're going to be tapping and we're going to be going downward. Now this is the first time we're tapping with our index finger and going with gravity, so this is kind of a new thing. Now Guthrie Gumma does something slightly different than the others. Instead of just holding the pick and using the middle finger, I believe he prefers the thumb on the neck for a brace. A lot of people love that feeling because it's a very secure feeling. If you're just doing a Kirk Hammett and floating your hand, it feels a little bit too unpredictable. So a lot of people like the precision of having the thumb right here. So if you hide the pick in the first finger, the index finger, put the thumb here, your middle finger is free to do the tapping now. And then after he taps, he'll go 2 different directions. So if he's on the higher strings, he'll go down towards the floor, and then I've seen him go on the 6th string up towards the sky. So it really depends on what he's going for, I believe, but he could do anything, so it doesn't surprise me that he's flexible in this area as well. Okay, now since we already have the pick and the index finger, let's move on to Reb Beach. What I've seen him do is post the thumb, use the middle finger to tap, and then pluck upward. His upward pluck, though, is a little bit more of a side pluck. So it looks more like he's doing this. And then I've also seen him use his ring finger as well, kind of like Steve Vai. But I'm just going to focus on the middle finger today, because sometimes he takes his ring and pinky and posts them at the bottom of the fretboard as well. It's pretty impressive how much sound you can get by pulling your finger back like that. Even though it seems like it's going pretty parallel with the string, you'd think you'd have to be completely perpendicular to it, like we're going to show later with somebody else's technique, but you can get a lot of sound by going this direction. Let's go back to gripping the pick a certain way for Paul Gilbert. He'll go to his middle finger to hold the pick like this, kind of like Nuno Betancourt. He uses his index finger to tap using the thumb at the top. He's going to pull upward. It's going to make this type of technique. So it's a lot like Eddie Van Halen and Vito Bratta, except he just grips the pick with his middle finger like this. Vito tucks it into the 3 fingers like that, and Eddie puts it in his mouth. Now, if you put the pick down completely, you can get into Jennifer Batten territory. Back in the day, she always had these lessons in guitar magazines with 8-finger tapping. I always thought it was really impressive. Now, she will hold the pick while doing this, but one of her most famous songs, she did Flight of the Bumblebee, she puts the pick down and does all 4-finger tapping, which is really impressive. So one thing that I like that she does is this real cool chromatic run, which is in that song, and you put your thumb over the top, and then you're free to use your other fingers. Really take note of the angle of my tapping hand. That's important, especially for someone we're going to talk about later. She will use a mute at the top here, so I'm doing a lot of extra muting that she doesn't really have to do sometimes, but I don't like to rely on having a mute on my guitar, so I do it the old school way. One of Buckethead's techniques could be very close to that, except he likes to hold the pick because he needs to go back to picking quite frequently. So if you take the pick and you're able to just put it between your thumb and your side of your hand like this, you once again have 4 fingers free to do all the crazy stuff that Buckethead does. But then when you want to go back to picking, the pick's right there for you to grab. So it's a matter of shifting it over like this, back to picking. Now, Zakk Wylde, Satriani, a lot of players who do pick tapping have their own special way of doing it. I just turn my hand like this. It looks a little bit weird. What I really love about what Zakk Wylde does and Satch is they keep their hand in this position. They use the side of the pick and they just move their hand over like this. So they keep the fist thing happening and they just start tapping like that. It's very convenient. And then from there, of course, it's really easy to go back to picking. Now, Randy Rhoads has a very interesting way of tapping. I saw one video of him doing this, and I think I can explain his technique. Here's why. If you take Kirk Hammett's technique by sticking your pinky out, using your middle finger, holding the pick, and tapping, the big difference is that Randy seems to use the flat part of his middle finger instead of the tip. And I think that's because coming from a classical background, he had to grow his nails up quite a bit. And I've had to do this before where I was trying to tap with longer nails, and it forces you to angle your finger differently. So he has this real soft touch, and it looks like this. It almost looks like he's just dabbing his middle finger up and down. He doesn't really curl it back because that would scrape the string with your nail if you had it longer. So it's really interesting that having longer nails kind of forced him into a certain technique when he was tapping. All right, let's talk about Jeff Watson. I alluded to him earlier where I said you have to change up your technique a little bit from the Jennifer Batten positioning. So let's put our picks down. He likes to stand up and hold his guitar because he has an extreme angle when he does his tapping with his right hand. But I'm gonna stay seated and I'm just gonna kind of exaggerate what his hand is. So if you look at my fingers, they're perpendicular to the strings. Jennifer Batten, Buckethead, they have more of an angle like this, so they kind of have to pull back when they tap. But Jeff Watson is like this, so parallel with the frets, perpendicular to the strings. So it's a very extreme thing, and I can see why he likes to wear a strap and stand up and do this. So what you end up with now is just a different feeling when you tap down. It feels very linear, like this, as opposed to this, where you sort of have to compensate for that angle as you're tapping. So now we get this kind of thing. It's really interesting to me how just changing the angle of my hand a little bit affects how it feels. Now, it's kind of difficult to mute the strings if your hand is up like this. Obviously, if it's angled, you have a lot more chance to do muting. So what it looks like he's doing is after he taps, his index finger of the tapping hand rests on the bigger strings, which mutes them, because those are the ones that are going to cause you the most problems. See how after I tapped, I went like this and held it up? And I believe that's doing 90% of the muting. Okay, everyone, I hope it was fun learning about the subtle differences between all those different players' tapping techniques. And if you want to, in the comments section, go ahead and let me know which player taps most like you. Like I said, Steve Vai's technique is really close to what I do. I love holding the pick and going right back to being able to pick right after I tap, and then using my middle finger and going with gravity, so towards the floor. That just seems to work the best for me. But in the comment section, let me know what you like. Okay, everyone, we'll catch you at the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.